Thanks, Paul. Howdy, everyone, and welcome to the 12th Field Notes Live event. My name is Dan Perkins, and I am the Senior Regional Soil Scientist in Bozeman, Montana, and the Field Notes representative for the Northwest Soil Survey region. As a regional representative, I serve on the Field Notes Review Committee. The Review Committee solicits and selects topics for each webinar. We have selected two exciting topics for you today, though I may be a little biased, and we encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should open by default. However, if for some reason your QA panel is not open, simply click on the question mark icon located at the right side of your screen. For closed captions, turn on the live caption button located in the lower right-hand corner. Today's session is being recorded. Recorded sessions are available in Teams on the Field Notes channel and on the National Soil Survey Center's YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's session. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Paul Reich to tell you a little more about today's webinar. Paul?
Thanks, Dan. Today, for our webinar number 12, I'm happy to introduce our two speakers. Our first presenter is Dean Stacy. Dean is an ecological site specialist located in Price, Utah. Dean will present his work on resource evaluation in determining ESDs and habitat types on Forest Service initial mapping in Utah. Welcome, Dean.
Hi, Paul. Thank you very much. Ready for me to share now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just trying to go to presentation mode. Okay, there we go. All right, thanks for the introduction, Paul. Again, my name is Dean Stacy. I'm located out of the Price, Utah office. Wanted to show you guys a little bit about Utah, that some of you may or may not have been here, and as well as some of the job aids that I've found to help me make these determinations for ecological sites and habitat types. Currently, we are working on 6 initial Forest Service soil surveys. I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint, you guys can read, but those are the 6 surveys that we are currently working on. We're also working on our eastern Emery County surveys in southeastern Utah in MLRA 34B and 35. For y'all that are not familiar with Utah, I just wanted to do a quick little overview of some of the diversity that we have here in Utah. Utah is the second driest state in the nation. We have precipitation ranging for anywhere between, but below 6 inches up to 60 inches or more. The major physiographic provinces are the Colorado Plateau, the Middle Rocky Mountains, and the Great Basin over here on the western side. For today's presentation, we will be concentrating on MLRA 47, which is the Wasatch and Uinta Mountains. You can see the pretty extensive number of MLRAs that are encompassed here in Utah. So we've got some great diversity in our landscapes here. So 47 is broken up into 4 LRUs. There are obviously they have a lot of similarities because they are the higher elevation, higher precip areas in the state. However, I just wanted to quickly go over some of the major differences which led us to develop these LRUs. LRU-A, the green here in the middle, is tertiary area geology and is dominated by conglomerate geology. The southern portion down here, the southern Wasatch Mountains, it's also tertiary, but it's dominated by igneous geology, and it's the only one of the LRUs that has a ustic-auritic precipitation regime and a frigid temperature regime. LRU-C is older, Precambrian. It's dominated by glacial activity, and to the best of my knowledge, it's one of the only, if not the only, major mountain range that runs east and west in North America. It also has the highest peak in Utah, which is Kings Peak, which is over 13,000 feet. LRU-D, we've historically had these first 3 LRUs in our set, but recently we did some further subdividing into the LRUD. It's also Paleozoic, and it's got some geology differences. It's got some vegetation differences being so far north, and it's also pretty greatly influenced by lake precipitation from the Great Salt Lake over here to the southwest of it. On this slide, I just wanted to show you the location of these as they sit within the MLRA. Currently, out of these 6 MLRAs, we're just under 6 million acres that we're working on right now. So these surveys were started back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all with different levels of completion. Historically, individuals from the NRCS, Forest Service, and even private contractors have completed the work in the past. So how can we accomplish all of this with all that vast area to cover and with limited staff? At the current time, these are the tasks that I need to address right now. Evaluating and trying to assign ecological sites and habitat types to over 1,000 map units. The other survey that I mentioned earlier, the Eastern Emory one, has about 3 weeks of field work this season, and then also will encompass a couple of weeks of office work. The Ashley National Forest, the 648, we have about 12 weeks of field work we're looking at, and that's going to take in about another 4 weeks of office work. I'm estimating about 4 weeks for my fiscal year 22 project goals, a few weeks to finish up the PES initiative, a couple of weeks working on TSS request. So with that, all of those things that I just mentioned are this half of the pie chart. This other portion over here is the time that I have remaining, but unfortunately, that's going to be outside of our field season, and so I'm not going to be able to get out on the ground as much as I would like to help make these determinations. So how can I make these determinations? So over the years, whether it's in the field office or the area office or now with the soil survey, I've found different tool sets that you can use. I'm sure there's very similar things like this across the nation. But here in Utah, we've got our Utah Geospatial Resource Center, AGRC, the NRCS and USGS in coordination with Utah State University's GIS department, and NatureServe developed the Southwest REGAP land cover data set. We've got ESRI, United States Forest Service, BLM Fire Histories, Utah Division of Wildlife, Range Trend Studies, National Interagency Fire Center, and also a lot of our other standard tools that we all use as far as aspect, slope, DAM, prism, prism data sets, etc. So today, I just wanted to focus on the Ashley National Forest, and it's the one highlighted up here in northern Utah in the UNM Mountains. As with most forests, access and terrain are often very difficult to reach all the areas needed in a timely manner. This, coupled with the fact that I'm the only ecologist here working with multiple soil scientists, I can't always make it to all the ped-ons that the soil scientists collect their data to help make these ecological and habitat determinations. The next presentation, Lucille, she'll be talking a little bit more in depth of information on the Ashley National Forest up there as well. So the first data set that we were able to acquire in working with the Ashley is their land system inventory. And it's an inventory, it's a land classification system in which they group areas with similar geology, landscape, landform, soils, and vegetation. With this information, we're able to investigate spatial aspects as well as the documents created by the Forest Service. And doing this, it's a great aid for us in helping doing our pre-mapping activities. This also gives us great information on what to expect when we're visiting each of these areas out there. And this is just a little example. I just did some bullets here, some of the information that, for instance, this Alpine Moraine 3, some of the main key points in these few paragraphs right there. And they have, I can't remember off the top of my head how many they actually have here on the Ashley, but there's a lot of them. There's some pretty good detailed information. So as you can see, by laying this LSI layer over the 3D image, it gives us a great perspective of how they are arranged throughout the landscape. I'm a very visual person, so when I can throw this over top of a 3D image, it gives me a lot better idea of what I'm looking at, or what I'm going to be looking at on the ground. It's also really helpful when we're trying to find the best access on the forest. The yellow lines that you see throughout here, those are all the maintained Forest Service trails, and so these good stuff to review when we're trying to find the best way to get in and out of areas. Okay. Wait, did that go? Okay. Okay, there we go. Another great asset that we got from the Ashley is their electronic studies inventory. The Forest Service has got documented over 96,000 files of historic field data forms and pictures all the way back from the 1950s. So all those little point files that you see across the landscape, those are all those areas in this particular shot where they have this information. Not only is this great for helping us when trying to become familiar with this area, it's also great for me, an ecologist that can't make it to all of these pet-ons. And so this is just another set of data that I can utilize in addition to the soil scientist pet-on data in helping me make my calls. Here's a little example of what you may encounter in some of their data that they have here. It helps me in investigating and determining the most appropriate ecological site and habitat type. Oftentimes they just have recorded photos like this with a couple of brief descriptions, maybe a couple of species, but in other instances they have scanned in images of field data sheets with very, pretty intensive vegetation data, which is, it's great in my effort. Not only is the data and photos helpful for me in determining these things, it's also a perfect information in helping determine dynamics of the site. In this example, you can see they documented where they had an avalanche and it wiped out the trees in its path, as you can see right here in the middle. I've ran across a lot of documentation going through and getting ready for this survey. The Engelmann spruce, for example, has been on a drastic decline within the forest. And shortly after that avalanche, you can see they started to notice all of these Engelmann spruce popping up there. I was really intrigued by this. I'm pretty much a neophyte when it comes to forest ecology because I've spent about 90% of my career in the lower elevation deserts of southeastern Utah. So I'm learning a lot going through all of this data. This was a great demonstration showing the necessity of disturbance to help rejuvenate spruce stands. And information like this is invaluable for me in helping develop state and transition models. Another resource I tend to also use is the Southwestern Regional Gap Analysis Program. It's a multi-institutional cooperative effort along with USGS's original GAP, which created a seamless land cover product for 5 states, including Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. I've used this a lot, even back when I was in the field office and area office, and I found that it can be helpful at times in helping determine what the dominant vegetation is. You'll click on one of the raster things there, and you'll have a little dialog box that comes up and says that it's subalpine fir or ponderosa pine or lodgepole pine or whatever. But I also have found that it is a work in progress, and I found that it's not always 100% accurate, but this is a work in progress, and I think it will evolve into a much better tool over time after further ground truthing can be done on it. So the professors at the Utah State University took that gap analysis a little bit further. They selected about 9,000 points throughout Utah and hired college students to go visit these locations, and they recorded what they found in these locations. You can see the little yellow point files there that are examples of where they had collected data. They gave a brief description of the dominant species presence, some soil characteristics, and they tried to determine the ecological site as well. This has been really helpful for me in the past. because I know it's an eyewitness account. The people were out there on the ground and recorded what they saw versus the raster data in the that we were looking at just previously. So once you were to find one of those points of interest, they created this in-depth access database. You go in there and enter the plot number up here, and it spits out dominant vegetation in the soil and characteristics and so on and so forth. It's not super comprehensive, but once again, it's just another one of those tools in our toolbox. Landfire is a similar land cover data set. It is part of the Landscape Fire and Resource Management Planning tool. It's a shared program between the Forest Service and the BLM. Again, with GAP, I have found that they do have their limitations, but it's a developing technology that I hope is just going to get better with time. Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, they've been collecting data for a number of years to help them better manage their wildlife habitat throughout the state. Although it's not very extensive, you can see in this particular picture, there's only a few points here. I've noticed in the past, most of it is in their mid to lower elevation stuff, not a lot of the forest data. There's not a lot of forest data there, which is unfortunately where I need my most help, but it's not a very extensive data set, but as far as throughout Utah, but the data that they give is great data. They have elevation data, precip data, soils data, ecological site information data, as well as the vegetation monitoring information, such as percent cover, production of the species that they've encountered. They can have comments in there if they've had fire in the past or any other disturbance, if they've done some bull hogging or chaining on pinyon juniper sites and so on and so forth. So it's got some really, really good data in it. Let's see, next one, we have the National Interagency Fire Center. They have their fire history perimeter data set. I found this very helpful in areas where it's historically maybe had documentation that it's, for example, dominated by forest habitat for trees and so on and so forth. But what I'm observing on the aerial imagery or what the soil scientists may have documented on their field forms is more dominated by shrub and herbaceous. Well, I can pull up this layer and overlay it and be like, oh, okay, well, there was a fire in 2006, and so that it helped it. I can see that there'd been a fire there, and then I can also see the dynamics of the site. And once again, this is another great tool that helps me document dynamics of a site and helping build state and transition models. Another source of data that we've been looking into trying to acquire is NRI data. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, the National Resource Inventory. There's been several decades of data, very comprehensive data collected throughout the United States by individuals like myself, and maybe some of you in the audience have collected this data. But there are some confidentiality issues with acquiring this data, so we're looking into that to, be a possible another great tool for our toolbox. Right now, I'd like to take a little bit of time to thank several individuals. Like I said, we're working on a lot of different initial soil surveys right now, and I'd like to thank some people that have helped us on some of these. For our Manti La Salle National Forest, we had Kim Camella and Emiliano Lopez out of our Grand Junction office. The Dixie National Forest, we had Travis Wazer and Ashley Anderson out of the Kerrville office. That has since been handed over to Beth Rowley out of the Missoula office. The Wasatch Cache National Forest, we had Randy Lewis out of the Ogden office. He has since retired, but evidently he loves entering data into NASA so much that he has come back to us through a Forest Service ACES program to continue to help us with data entry on that particular forest. The Ashley National Forest will be handled in-house here out of the Price office. The Tusher and Provence, part of the Fish Lake National Forest, will be handled from Beth out of the Missoula office again. The eastern portion of the Fish Lake is going to be handled by Craig Bird and Todd Carr out of the Lubbock office. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Well, thanks, Dean. I appreciate your presentation. There is, I do see one published question. I'll read that to you. It says, you mentioned assigning both ecological sites and habitat types. What are habitat types and how do they differ from ecological sites?
I'm not positive that I can give you an official definition of that, but we use ecological sites in describing our ecological dynamics that we find throughout the landscape. The Forest Service uses a different classification system called habitat types, and so on the Ashley National, well, on all of these forests, they've asked us, if possible, to try and assign habitat types, excuse me, along with our ecological sites.
Another question that just came through is, why is NRI data confidential?
I truly don't know that answer. I mean, I've heard, rumors on why it is that there's a lot of congressional decisions made, funding decisions made based off of this data. And I don't know if that's the reason it is, but that's why I've thought that it may be confidential, is because there's a lot of very important financial decisions, the Congress passing money down to the different agencies based off of resource data that is collected.
And I had one question for you, Dean. You showed us a number of different data sets from various partners and organizations. Was there any particular data set that you found to be the most useful in your work?
So far with the Ashley, depending on which forest I've worked on, some of them have more data than others. The Dixie National Forest had a lot of good historic data documented by whether it was range specialists, forest, soil scientists, whatever. There's a pretty good set of data working with them. Some of them it is very limited, and with these surveys, order 4 surveys, we're only going down to the family level. And so I've discussed with several individuals that until I can get out on the ground, I'm not comfortable making a recommend ecological site determination on this, because I'd rather it be blank than wrong. And I've been told that at the family level, we don't have to determine an ecological site. But the Ashley National Forest has got a plethora of data. You saw the land site inventory and the Ashley electronics inventory data set. Very, very comprehensive data set going back to the 50s.
All right, very good. That's all the questions I'm seeing for now. If there's any extras that we don't get to, we can always answer them at a later time.
Okay.
Thank you, Dean.
All right, thank you.
Okay, before I introduce our next presenter, I just want to remind everyone that our next webinar, number 13, is scheduled for May 10. So keep a lookout for more webinar details soon. Okay, our final presenter is Lucille Rollins. She's also out of the Price, Utah office. Lucille is a soil scientist, and Lucille's talk is on Ashley National Forest initial DSM soil survey work in FY21. Welcome, Lucille.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Paul. So my name is Lucille Rollins, and I'm a soil scientist in Price, Utah. And today I'm going to be sharing with you an update on our initial soil survey work in the Ashley National Forest, which began last year. And I thought I would actually start by highlighting a few features of this photo. So it's taken in the southwest corner of the soil survey area. And to orient us geographically, I've shared a couple insets to the right. So the bottom shows this photo's approximate location in the survey area, and the top is the survey area's location relative to other Western states. So in the photo, our soil scientist intern, Austin Lambert, is working his way up the hillside, and we can see evidence of mass wasting in the area. In the background, there is a prominent hummocky toe. And then in the foreground, we see aspen, which also grows along the valley bottom. And conifers grow extensively throughout the soil survey area. And in this photo, we could expect to find lodgepole pine, Doug fir, and Engelmann spruce. And there's also a pair of dead trees to the right center. These are subalpine fir. And if you look across the hillside, there are more dead trees scattered there. And so unsurprisingly, fire and fuels management is an important consideration here in the area which has experienced drought, fire suppression, and where trees have been subjected to beetle kill. And so up next, I'll introduce you to the team members working on the project and provide an overview of our timeline, information about the forest and the survey area, tools we're using to complete the survey, along with some snapshots from last season and what we're looking forward to in 2022. So this is the Price Utah MLRA Soil Survey crew, and Christy is our fearless leader. Dean, you just met, and then Miles and I work as staff soil scientists, and Austin joined us last year and will be returning this coming summer as a soil scientist intern. So we've collaborated extensively with the Forest Service. Jeff has been instrumental in making sure that we have the resources we need. Sarah helps us complete pet-on descriptions. And then we're also working quite a bit with GTAC, which stands for Geospatial Technology and Application Center, and they operate under the umbrella of the Forest Service. So Claire assists us in executing the digital soil mapping piece of the project, and then she and her colleague Zach joined us last August in the field for 4 days. And then Jay, who is the soil survey leader in Missoula, helped us transfer Forest Service soils data to NRCS. And Travis, because of his digital soil mapping expertise, serves as a mentor on the project. And so last but not least, we have Chuck, Emiliano, and Kim from the Grand Junction, Colorado MLRA crew. They completed surveys last summer and will be joining us again this coming summer. So they worked extensively in the eastern section of the survey, which is where the Flaming Gorge National Recreation Area is located, which you can see in the inset to the left. And so this particular photo is taken at one of Emiliano's pits and is facing north towards the Flaming Gorge Reservoir. So this project is a hybrid initial soil survey project with mapping done to order 4. And it's a hybrid in that we are delivering a vector and raster product at the project's completion. So we're using digital and traditional soil mapping techniques to complete it. The vector product is going to be the traditional product with named soil components, and the raster product is going to be a predictive model. So we're still deciding what soil class that model will predict for sure, but it will most likely predict soils at the family level. And so the Forest Service has made a couple special requests. The first one is to assign habitat types, which Dean talked about. And then the second is to update their ocular macroplot sites. And so the ocular macroplot sites are vegetation monitoring sites that were begun and maintained by Cheryl Goodrich and Alan Hooper, respectively. And so I'll share more details about the ocular macroplot sites later on in the presentation. And so this is a general timeline for the project. We started it in 2021 with field work, and last year really served as a recon year for us. We were interested to see how the digital soil mapping aspect worked with CLHS sampling. And so we're going to continue field work this summer and also begin map unit publication in the fall and then into the winter, with that process continuing throughout 2023. And so we're hoping to wrap up the project in 2024, but we have the option to continue into 2025 if needed. And Dean covered this, so I'll keep it quick and just reiterate that we are in Land Resource Region E. We're in MLRA 47, which is the Wasatch and Uinta Mountains. So specifically, we are in the Uintas, which are this east-west running arm located in the northeast section of Utah, where Utah meets Wyoming and Colorado. And this is the soil survey area polygon, which is made up of the Ashley National Forest. So the survey area is UT 648, and it's about 85 miles long and 35 miles wide. And you can see Price, Utah there at the bottom. So for us, it ends up being about an hour and a half to 2.5 hour drive. And then it's about 2 to 3 hours from Salt Lake City, which is the capital city of Utah, and is located to the west of the survey area. So the forest is surrounded by arid basins to the south and the north. It was first home to indigenous Ute people, and the Ashley began as the Uinta Forest Reserve in 1897 and was officially designated the Ashley in 1908. And the forest itself is about 1.5 million acres. The survey is about 1 million. And the Uinta Mountains include the western and eastern Uintas. The survey area is made up of the western Uintas, which are also known as the high Uintas. And they're aptly named because this range has more peaks greater than 11,000 feet than any other Utah mountain range. And it has Utah's only peaks over 13,000, which includes Kings Peak, which Dean mentioned. And the survey area spans across 4 counties, has diverse habitats. For animal life, you could expect to find moose, black bears, and pine martens here, even the occasionally spotted wolverine and lynx. And then Dean shared that the elevation ranges from 5,500 to 13,000 feet. This is a visual representation of the precipitation in the area, which is color-coded by important breaks. And generally, moisture regimes are ustic, aeritic to eutic, with a typical range of 12 inches to 40 inches of precip, with frigid and cryotic temperature regimes. There is a section in the northeast corner of the forest that may include a mesic area, but we have yet to decide on classification for that area definitively. And in terms of how this area is used, recreation was described to me as big and going to get bigger. There are lots of ways to enjoy this area. Boating and fishing are common in the Flaming Gorge. There is lots of primitive and developed camping. There's also hunting here, winter activities like snowmobiling and cross-country skiing. And the area has plenty of 4x4 trails. There's been a trend of increasing use of off-highway vehicles here, like side-by-sides. But about 45% of the area is described as primitive or semi-primitive non-motorized recreation, with about 970 miles of non-motorized trails, at least as of 2017. And then in terms of grazing, there are currently 86 permittees and 64 active allotments. Most of the forest is grazed. And for timber, at least as of 2012, the Ashley accounted for 16% of Utah's national forest timber harvest. Up until that point, it seemed to be trending downward over time. That could be due in part to the fact that a significant area here is inventoried roadless, which means that new roads cannot be built. And they also typically receive a small number of bids for the timber sales. So compared to other forests, there isn't as much demand. There is also one area of the forest that is used for oil leases and pads. It's called the Berry Petroleum Gas Lease, but this is in a separate area that has already been mapped and is not included in UT 648. And then these are the current management focuses. So the first is to update documentation relating to planning forest-wide, as well as specifically for the Flaming Gorge and the Ashley Karst National Recreation and Geologic Area. And then the second priority is to complete NEPA projects. And these projects include making improvements to range, prescribed burning, aspen restoration, as well as recreation and infrastructure projects. And then the geological history of the Uintas features 2 mountain ranges. The second one, which is still standing, coastal sandy soils and shallow marine mud, with this area having been under or near water throughout most of geological time. Actually, at a pit near where the photo in the introduction was taken, the crew actually found what appeared to be horn coral fossils. And unfortunately, we don't have photos of the fossils to share, but they pretty closely resembled the image to the bottom right. So the current mountain range began uplifting at the end of the Cretaceous period, which is boxed in orange on the Cretaceous, on the composite. And there are about 30 recognized formations here. Rock formations in the Uinta Mountains range from 2 billion years old to being relatively young. And then most of the formations here are sedimentary including sandstone, conglomerate, shale, and limestone. But we have encountered and expect to encounter more quartzite, which is at the very bottom of the composite. And then I wanted to highlight the Uinta mountain group, which is a younger Precambrian formation, also near the bottom of the composite. And this is significant because it's found in most of the high peaks and has been subjected to glaciation. And then I also wanted to highlight a pair at the top of the composite. I actually began working for the NRCS last August, and I spent my first week in the field digging in soils that were formed on Browns Park Formation and Bishop Conglomerate. And so these are the 3 pits we dug on my second day. They all classified out as loamy skeletal, and they made incredibly hard digging, but they were really good training. And then the geological map for the Western Uintas displays the extent of glaciation in the area. That pink color is made up of Smith's Fort Till. And at its peak, glaciation is thought to have extended 1,000 to 1,500 square miles over this area, with valley glaciers hanging around until about 7,000 years ago. And then Dean talked a bit about the land systems inventory. So my goal here is to talk about it more from a soils perspective. But it's a land classification system that delineates the landscape, in this case the forest, into land type associations, which are displayed for the survey area on the slide. And so these delineations are made based on geology, geomorphic processes, landforms, and vegetation. And we use land type associations to stratify our CLHS model, which I'll talk more about in a bit. And then additionally, land type associations can be further delineated into land types. And associations can have anywhere from a few to several. So for example, the land type association glacial bottom has 5 land types, and these are distinguishable from one another in some way. And so we use the Forest Service's existing line work for pre-mapping, and one potential impact of a completed survey would be the identification of more land types as we inspect the line work and then gather more data on the ground. And so in terms of soil information, in land type association and land types, it's usually missing or pretty general. So I've included a couple examples of both here. In the Antelope Flats Association, for instance, the only soils information referenced is the gypsiferous and alkaline or saline sediments of Mako Shale. And so this presents an opportunity for us to fill in soils information. So now I'll talk a little bit about the 2021 season. And so again, this served as a recon year for us. We were interested in what sampling sites would look like with CLHS. And so CLHS stands for Conditioned Latin Hypercube Sampling. It's a stratified random sampling technique. And so this is where the digital soil mapping comes in, along with Claire and GTech. So Claire builds the model to select the sampling sites. And the goal with using CLHS is to reduce redundancy and capture variability. Sometimes what we saw is that CLHS picked unique versus representative sites, but a benefit is that we're able to build CLHS based on where it has been sampled already. And so we can use this to our advantage in upcoming field seasons. And so our goal last year was to capture 15 points per land type association. And an important point about those points is that they were constrained. And so that means that we were purposeful in where we did and did not place them. They had to be a certain distance from the road, within the area of archaeological clearance, and then also outside the wilderness area. And so in addition to stratifying the model by land type associations, there are 13 layers going into CLHS to capture the variability. And so these are listed here. So overall for the 2021 season, we captured 186 points. And the Price Utah crew used Survey123 for data capture. So I thought I would share what that looks like from our end. So Survey123 is an app that we downloaded to our personal phones. And once we open the app, we'd expect to see that first screenshot, which has options for vegetation forms and the pet-on description. And then the second and third screenshots are the different options we have to fill out. These make up the top of the pet-on description form. And then the fourth screenshot is showing that we're able to find our location. So this screenshot is based on being at my home, but we'd also be able to find it in the field even without service. And so that last screenshot is showing the geomorphic descriptors, and these are preloaded based on what is applicable to our soil survey area. So the benefit to us is that after submitting these forms, the data is almost immediately available on ArcGIS Online to sort through. And then at the end of the field season, it was loaded directly into NRCS. So we didn't have to enter the site table information, which sped up our data entry time. And then this is the collection of our 2021 points. So you can see that we stayed near the survey area boundary and didn't hit the wilderness area, which is the hatched area in blue. And then we didn't get 15 points in each land type association, but we did manage to hit all of them. And then I thought I would highlight a pit in the southwestern corner of the soil survey area, which you can see under the magnifying glass. And so this area is called Lightning Ridge. It's actually next door to that hummocky toad that I mentioned in the introduction. And this site is special because it's an example of an ocular macroplot site. So our goal here is to complete the typical soil survey, but also to take a more detailed vegetation inventory. So Dean was at this site to help with that. And this allows us to capture another year of vegetation data for the Forest Service at these specific sites. And then this is what our sample looked like from this pit. So we are collecting samples from each horizon and each pit in the survey, which will allow us to have the option to run MIR as needed later, or give it to the Forest Service if they would like to view them. And then this is what the ocular macroplot data would look like coming from the Forest Service. Dean also shared this. And so these are ongoing vegetation surveys. This particular one is from 2012. And so overall goals at the macroplot sites include capturing photos to provide photo monitoring. So you can see that we tried to recreate some of their photos here. Also to capture 1/10 acre ocular plot data, and then specifically for us to capture soil pet-on data. And this database is used for projects and NEPA reports. Sarah also shared with me that the data has been used in court cases to demonstrate the forest has hard data to back up land management and livestock allotment plans, as well as in their forest plan revision process. And so as far as 2022, we are looking forward to getting 2 additional soil scientists. They're coming to us as temporary details and will be with us for 12 weeks starting in June. We're also going to start tackling that wilderness area. So to do that, we're planning 1 to 2 at least week-long backpacking trips. And then we're also going to begin map unit publication in the fall. Also throughout this year, we're going to begin testing the raster product. So I mentioned that Jay helped us transfer Forest Service soils data into NRCS. We'll be able to use that transferred data for ground truthing. And then in terms of sampling, we are going to be using CLHS and traditional techniques for this field season. So the goal with CLHS sampling points is going to be to train the predictive model, and the traditional points will be to validate the model. And so the goal with these will be to find representative as opposed to obscure sites. And then our goal is to describe 100 pits each this coming summer. And then I would like to talk also about the impacts of a completed soil survey. I mentioned a couple, and I'll share 3 more here. So the first is that their existing vegetation databases, so the range ecology database and land systems inventory databases, will be outfitted with soils information. And once the land systems inventory is updated, the forest will be able to generate a new ecosystem diversity evaluation report, which will be useful in future management decisions. Also, the predictive model has the potential to mitigate access challenges in the wilderness and speed up the process of assessing hard to reach places. And then finally, the interpretive material generated from a completed survey will speed up management procedures, in particular those associated with NEPA projects, which require interpretive material. And when I asked Sarah, the soil scientist in the Ashley, about the impact of a completed survey, she shared with me that future soil scientists will have it made. So it is fun to see how excited they are to have this completed. And then these are just a few of my favorite photos from the area. That first one is the inside of an immature subalpine fir cone. The second is a rattlesnake that luckily I did not encounter. The third is Austin and Miles admiring the landscape. And then finally, you've got Dean down there at the bottom hanging out by a moraine. And then, yeah, if anyone has any questions, I am happy to answer those. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lucille. Appreciate your presentation today. Yeah, there are a number of questions that have been published. Let me read them off. The first one, has the land systems inventory been useful for pre-mapping, and does the line work seem accurate?
So yes, absolutely. The line work is helpful. It does seem accurate. We've divided it up so that we all have different areas in which we're pre-mapping. So I guess I can only speak for my area in terms of if it's been accurate or not, but it seems like for the most part it is. There are a couple of maybe specific land types where I've ended up dividing out more than others, but yeah, for the most part, it's really helpful. I think it reduces the overall workload in pre-mapping because that area is pretty much already divided up.
We have a few questions related to using Survey123. Did you like using Survey123 for data collection? Any pros and cons?
So I'll admit that I am mostly a pen and paper gal. And so at first I wasn't very stoked about using it. I was previously a soil judger, so I was used to writing things on paper. But it is really handy to be able to store, for instance, like taking photos, to store that all in one place. And then also to have, I guess, preloaded options for the geomorphic descriptors. That was really handy. And then also, you know, being able to look at that data on ArcGIS Online when I had questions maybe about where a pit was, to be able to see it in relation to all the other pits. That was really handy. And then of course the data entry piece of it, not having to enter the site table information. That was also really handy.
And so, yeah, related to this is, did you use the NRCS designed Pet-on Description Soils 123 form?
Oh, wait, can you repeat that question, Paul?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it might be. I don't know if there's an overall NRCS Survey123 form for entering Pet-on descriptions, or was this more of like a custom form that perhaps you use there locally?
Oh yeah, so I took the digital soil management class a few weeks ago, and they shared a demonstration on Survey123, and their forms look different. So
Okay.
it seems like for us, this was custom made.
Okay. And then lastly, for the Survey123 questions is, can you load it directly into NRCS, the collected data?
Yes. So we, in the office, I don't think that we handled that. I think Dan did that for us. So it's kind of like magic. It was just there.
Did you use Survey123 to do descriptions in the field and ArcGIS collector?
No, we did not use the latter.
Okay. Then there's one last question. You mentioned running MIR on soil samples. What is MIR and how does it help in soil survey?
So MIR that's actually not the full acronym. It's MIR DRS, which stands for mid-infrared diffuse reflectance spectroscopy. And it's a method of processing soil samples that we're planning on getting trained, like our office is planning on getting trained on this fall. That it's supposed to be a, I guess, more cost-effective and speedier way to evaluate samples, so you're able to get data quicker for these pet-ons, or for these descriptions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat.
Paul, can I jump in real quick just on one?
Yes, sir.
So the Survey123 forms, We just did them as a test run this first summer with Idaho and Utah. So those were designed out of the regional office with the NRCS import. And we're continuing the effort this summer into some more offices and adding pet on horizon collection information that'll also import into NRCS. So those forms are coming from the regional office. There's a couple other forms floating around that are kind of all customized like that. So there's kind of multiple efforts doing that right now.
Okay, very good. Well, I would really like to thank both of our presenters today. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Lucille. Well, I certainly hope that we see everyone again next month. Have a great day, and bye for now.